Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America. Great to have you with us on the program. Thank you for joining us. Website thisweekinamerica.us. Back with us on the program, patient advocate, health writer Julia Schopick. The website is honestmedicine.com. That's the name of the book as well. In 1990, driven by the need to find innovative treatments for her 40-year-old husband after his diagnosis with a malignant brain tumor and the grim prognosis that followed, Julia knew she had to do something to buy him more time, and she did. After a great deal of research, Julia added her treatments to those of his doctors, and her husband survived 15 years post-diagnosis and 12 years beyond his doctor's expectations. Her story in the award-winning book, Honest Medicine, Effective Time-Tested, Inexpensive Treatments for Life-Threatening Diseases. It's an Amazon bestseller, won first place in the Indie Excellence Award for Alternative Medicine, now being translated into a whole lot of other languages besides, of course, English, as a bestseller, as I say. Julia, back with us on the program. Hi, Julia. Welcome to the show once again.
You know I always love to be on your show. Actually, this time I reached out to you, so...
Well, and that's because it's March is National Autoimmune Disease Awareness Month, and it was a great time, and it was always a pleasure to hear from you. An idea for a program, because one of the treatments that you've talked about really is in play, and it's described as a miracle drug, actually, in dealing with some of the autoimmune diseases. Let's talk about exactly what diseases fall in that category.
Oh, my God, Rick. You know, there are so many. I think that somebody coined it the terrible 100.
Yes.
But to be very honest with you, I've seen a list of up to 170 of them. And I'm going to mention some of them, but please know that there are many, many more than the ones I'm going to mention. But I'm mentioning probably the most common, the ones that are known best. And they are multiple sclerosis, lupus, myasthenia gravis, rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, fibromyalgia, Hashimoto's disease, Graves' disease, chronic fatigue. Also, are you ready for this, Rick? A lot of diseases that were not known to have an autoimmune component are now being found to have one. Diseases like Parkinson's. Can you imagine? There is one lady, you might want to interview her at some point, who has had wonderful results with low-dose naltrexone, which is the treatment we're going to be talking about that is so good for autoimmune diseases. She has had amazing results with her Parkinson's disease for taking low-dose naltrexone. So and there are others like psoriasis and, scleroderma. I urge people to just, Google autoimmune diseases, and you will be stunned by all the diseases you find. Also, the American Autoimmune Related Diseases Association, AARDA, has some excellent information. So they're growing. There are more and more all the time. They take a tremendous toll on our healthcare system, which is why I think it's so important to talk during this month about a treatment that is less expensive, that is non-toxic, because so many of the drugs for autoimmune diseases are very toxic and very expensive.
Very expensive, very toxic. As I'm reading, I mean, you can spend thousands of dollars a month on some of this medication.
And have the pleasure of suffering.
Yes, yeah. It's amazing that it brings you great discomfort and suffering as you're taking that. In the book, and the book is called Honest Medicine. It's available all across the country. Information at Julia's website, honestmedicine.com. An award-winning blogger as well. You've got the story of Linda Elskwood, and I'll just talk about this very briefly. She had MS and went through what I'm sure so many do, where the doctor says, there's not much more than I can do. She found out about LDN, and it really made a difference in her life, and she's working for other people now to try to get the word out as well.
You mentioned you really are good. You're one of the few who actually read the book, which is wonderful. I appreciate it. But Linda has also started an organization of her own called the LDNResearchTrust.org. And I don't know if you know this, but she had an amazing conference this past weekend. If people go to ldn2016.com, or is it .org? I can look it up, but one or the other. And you will see that she had a conference. She's conducted many conferences having to do with low-dose naltrexone, and she gets speakers from all over the world to talk about this inexpensive, off-label, low-dose drug that people are finding works for so many diseases, including, by the way, there is one of the talks on depression. And of course that makes sense because low-dose naltrexone raises endorphin levels, and there you go.
This is one of the treatments that you discovered, LDN, we'll call it for the program, so I'm not going to have to keep pronouncing big words during the course of the program, but LDN. And this is amazing because you basically, you're so high on this that you said it could literally save national health care. And that's not really an exaggeration. There's so many applications. It is inexpensive, limited side effects, and it works.
And how do we get to the powers that be? I know that poor Dr. David Gluck, who contributed a chapter to my book to Honest Medicine, and oh my God, he has been trying to get the powers that be in Washington. You know, when they were creating the Affordable Care Act, he tried to get it there. And you know, he's a doctor. You know, you would think. But he has not been able to make inroads. And it breaks my heart because it really could save us, you know. And I don't mean to sound messianic here or totally religious, but if you knew that there was a drug that wasn't as expensive as these drugs that are out there, wouldn't that be something that our friends in Washington should want to know about?
Yes. With when you're looking at autoimmune disease, they figure $100 billion a year in healthcare cost. Of course, that's income for some people. So I guess that's where the where the resistance is. You can look at it as expenditures or income, depending on what side of the ledger book you're looking at. And I guess the question is then, why do not doctors prescribe this? And talk about that. And we could spend literally 3 or 4 programs talking about this relationship between big drug companies, big pharma, and doctors. But why is there the reluctance to use something that, and this is not something that's new. This has been around literally for a number of decades.
30 years. And you ask about the resistance. And again, I'm going to go to Dr. David Gluck. If anybody is interested in reading the chapter by Dr. David Gluck, I'm happy to send it to them as a PDF if they just write to me at Juliet Honest Medicine and put Dr. Gluck's chapter, Rick Bratton, in the subject line, okay? Because I get so many emails, so that would help me out. But he describes how somehow we've had, as you just hinted at, a relationship where the pharmaceutical industry is very, very close with the doctors. You may have seen, I'm sure that your listeners have seen when they go to the doctor, detail people from the drug companies coming in and dispensing, samples, right?
And I've been there when they brought in lunch.
Yes, they bring in lunch, and that they're trying to put a stop to that kind of thing. But no, they're still bringing in lunch. But it's even worse. It goes in the beginning of the whole thing. I don't know how many of your listeners know this, but the trials, the phase 3 clinical trials that the FDA likes to see before it recommends any drug are so expensive, in the millions and billions of dollars, that the only ones who can afford to conduct these studies are, guess who? The pharmaceutical companies. And it gets worse. The pharmaceutical companies that are going to make a profit from these drugs.
Exactly.
So you have this double whammy, and it gets worse. I feel like I'm sounding like, those ads, and there's more.
Yes.
On television.
But there's more.
But there is more. Let me tell you the more part. The articles, the scholarly articles in the journals that your doctor reads, and they convince him, or her to prescribe a drug. Well, guess who in many cases writes those articles? They are often written by the pharmaceutical company PR person or writers, and they pay prestigious doctors. I'm particularly slowing down as I say this. They pay doctors to put their names to the articles. So, of course, the article doesn't in your doctor's journal doesn't say by Jim Ferry, person who works for Merck or person who
Right,
works
right.
for Pfizer. It will say Dr. So and so from a prestigious institution.
And I've seen where, in order for maybe the doctor to feel like he's not really, to feel less dirty because he's involved in this, he doesn't get a direct check for that. But when they have their annual conference in Acapulco next year, he'll be their keynote speaker for $25,000, totally
Yeah.
separate, but yet related.
Yeah. And you know something? It's very interesting. There's a man, I don't know if you've ever interviewed him, Rick. His name is John Abramson, and he wrote a book called Overdosed America. It's an oldie but a goodie. And he was once on radio. It talks about this uncomfortable relationship between pharma and doctors. It's about a lot more, but that's one of the main things. He was on the radio several years ago, and he brought up this point, that I just brought up about
Yes.
doctors putting their names. And this was, I would say, 5-10 years ago. The interviewer said, well, what kinds of amounts of money are we talking about? Could we say $50,000? And Abramson got real quiet, and he said, yeah, for a high-powered name, yes. So sometimes they're just paid directly, and as you pointed out, sometimes they're paid indirectly. So it's not a pretty picture. And I want to point out, I'm not saying that every person whose name is on an article.
No,
Please.
but yeah, we should sort of look into it, and then you feel better. You feel like, okay, my doctor he really believes this.
Yeah. And this is the thing. You know what? There's a wonderful movie out. I can email you the link to it. It's called Surviving Terminal Cancer. And in it, they talk about that, doctors want to see these phase 3 clinical trials, but that's really, as we just said, the only ones who can afford to fund them are the pharmaceutical companies.
Yes.
What about these smaller studies that are maybe phase 2? That there have been a lot of these studies done on low-dose naltrexone, at places like Stanford University, Penn State, University of California, San Francisco. I mean, these are not rinky-dink places, and they've done studies on low-dose naltrexone and they're published in very prestigious journals, like the American Journal of Gastroenterology. And yet the doctors will say, well, it wasn't a phase 3. And this, to me, is very sad,
You deal so often, literally every day, with coaching people as to how to go in and talk to their doctor to get them to try some of these treatments that have been effective, such as LDN. And by the way, our guest on the program is Julia Schopick. That's Schopick. The book we're talking about is Honest Medicine, Effective Time-Tested Inexpensive Treatments for Life-Threatening Diseases. It's an Amazon bestseller. It's an award-winning book. She's also created the award-winning blog at honestmedicine.com. Her website book is being translated into a number of languages and being distributed literally worldwide because it's really helping so many people. But if you go to the website, and we've talked about this in the program before, you actually sort of lead people through how to present this to the doctor. There's a right way, there's a wrong way. There's a way that you might get results, a way that you probably aren't going to get results. When you go in and the doctor says, yeah, LDN, I've sort of heard about it, I'm not familiar, and there aren't studies, you actually, if you come prepared, you can present some of the smaller studies. Will they pay attention to those, again, done by prestigious organizations?
Guess what? I have prepared for my coaching clients, some materials to bring to the doctor. And you read my mind, because one of the pieces of information is a several-page kind of synopsis of the smaller studies that have been done on low-dose naltrexone. And the beauty of the piece that I put together is that there are links to all of the studies, the abstracts on PubMed. And PubMed is the government-run site that doctors really respect, okay? And so they can see that all of these studies have been published in PubMed. That's one of the kinds of things you should bring to your doctor. There are others too, and I've actually had an article published on that, and I can send that to people if they're interested. As a matter of fact, I'll post it on my Facebook page, and also on the Julia Schopick Presents Honest Medicine Facebook page. But I tell people the first thing is, don't say, I heard about this treatment on the internet. Do not say that,
Yes, yes.
And also, even though I know that don't say, oh, I heard this woman, I forget her name, she was on radio. Go in, and I help people to the first thing you've got to do is become educated yourself. And I give people materials that will educate them, about low-dose naltrexone. Educate yourself.
You know firsthand how to present this because you were literally a pioneer in doing this. I mean, you learned from doing it the wrong way, how you approach doctors and doing it the right way.
That's right.
A few minutes left in the program, and now people can go, LDN, they can go to your website, they can go online and get reputable information. Back in 1990, how did you go by doing research to try to come up with treatments that would prolong the life, possibly save the life of your husband?
You know what? That's a very good question. Back in 1990, I don't think I did. But it got very interesting because as the years went on, what I did in 1990 was, I found a nutritionist that was very helpful in helping my husband to clean up his diet and to take supplements and all of that. And she was a great researcher. I believe she had to go to the library, for a lot of the things that she did. But the internet started to become really big as my husband, don't forget, he lived for 15 years. And it was in 2001 that he had a recurrence of the tumor. And that is the time that his suture line, the line, where they had cut in,
yes,
wouldn't heal because he had had radiation previously. In 1991, he had had radiation. So he ended up having 8 additional surgeries in a vain attempt to find 2 pieces of skin that would heal. Nothing worked. He only got worse and worse and worse because of the repeated surgeries, until finally he was just really, bedbound. This guy who had walked into the surgery telling jokes, no more. He was very, very compromised, paralyzed, bedbound. And at that point, I was in my glory doing research. And you want to know something? I put together the best packet of information, I think, even looking back, about wound healing. And do you know what? The doctors didn't read it. And it was just dumb luck in this case. I would love to say, my research brought me to the treatment that I did bring the treatment that ended up stopping my husband from his suture line opening up. It was called Silverlawn. It's one of the 4 treatments I talk about in my book, In Honest Medicine. But I actually found out about it from an integrative doctor because he told me about it and the timing was right. And the doctors allowed me to put it on Tim's head, and his skin started healing literally overnight. And guess what? The doctors did not want to accept that that was what had worked. They wanted to believe that it was one of their treatments, the IV antibiotic that my husband had been on for 6 weeks, and they used this word, that kicked in after 6 weeks.
It's amazing. We've talked about that before, and we go back to the MS story with Linda Elsgood, and the doctor really didn't want to give LDN any credit. It was basically, whatever you're doing, continue to do it. But I'm sure it wasn't the LDN. And stories like that, in fact, you've got a number of patients, and you do their actual stories, success stories, in the book, Honest Medicine, Effective Time-Tested, Inexpensive Treatments for Life-Threatening Diseases. The one of the 4 treatments we're talking about, because it is National Autoimmune Disease Awareness Month, is LDN. Information available in the book at the website honestmedicine.com. Julia Schopick has been our guest with us on the program. The time always goes by too quickly. We will have you back because there is so much more information that you really need to get out there. You're doing an excellent job of doing that. And what's it like now to be an international book bestseller and have this book in Polish and all these other languages, and people actually
I'm so excited about it.
yeah, learning from what you're telling them, and we'll have to talk about the response you're getting from overseas and how maybe the medical community is a little bit different over there than it is here.
Can we talk about that sometime? I'd love to talk about it today, but I know we're out of time because in Norway, oh my God, there has already been a TV video. It's like a sensation, low dose naltrexone, and all of the translators that I've worked with tell me I'm on low dose naltrexone too, from the Netherlands, from Poland. It's great.
Well, we will do that. I just wrote it down. We will do that the next time. The book is Honest Medicine. Dr. David Brownstein is quoted as saying honest medicine should be required reading for all physicians and patients searching for safe and effective therapies. You'll find those in the book. Once again, it's called Honest Medicine, Effective, Time-Tested, Inexpensive Treatments for Life-Threatening Diseases. The website is honestmedicine.com. The book's available all across the country. And, of course, you can link on directly at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Julia, thank you so much for being with us. We'll check in shortly, and we'll talk about the relationship between healthcare here and overseas. Looking forward to doing that in the next program.
You are terrific, Rick. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. It is always a pleasure to have you on the program. Once again, the website, very simple, honestmedicine.com. You're listening to This Week in America. Information on Julia and all our guests at our website, thisweekinamerica.us.